This is Daily Blast Live. We're talking about what you're talking about.
You all ready for this?
This is a sham.
No.
Nope.
Y'all, just stop.
Get real.
Welcome to DBL. I'm Sam in for Tori today. How are you guys? Everybody feeling good?
Yeah.
Okay.
How are you feeling?
Right. I feel good now.
Yeah.
It's been a week.
There's a lightness in your face.
Yeah. I had COVID. I'll just call it what it is. And I had not gotten COVID ever. And my kids got COVID and they were asymptomatic. It wiped me out. My husband, taking care of all of us, never got it.
Shout out to Mark.
Superhuman over there. I know.
Glad you're back.
Oh, it feels good to be back in a routine, though. All right, so we got to talk about this. I know that our viewers have a lot to say. More classified documents were found at President Biden's home in Delaware last week. 6 classified documents were found in his personal library. This is on top of classified documents found in his Delaware garage, as well as the ones found at his office at the think tank. Now many Republicans are calling for the release of visitor logs from his home, but the White House counsel's office is saying there are no visitor logs that track guests to the president's personal space. So what do you all think about these classified documents being found? And also, how do you think this will affect the investigation into the documents recovered from Trump's home in Florida? Al.
I look.
This is a storm, I feel like.
It's just a storm of disorganization.
Yes.
It's like, that seems like something you would say about your older father. Like, oh, he's got my house papers. One's at his office, one's in his car. It really strikes me as concerning, Erica, that these important documents are not even just in one place they shouldn't be, but seemingly just kind of littered like they're leaving breadcrumbs, like Hansel and Gretel. I don't know if that's who did that, but it's such a weird thing that I always thought, like, when we watch these movies and it's like Tom Cruise and they got to break in and their codes and it's behind a lockbox, and it just appears that presidents just leave it out in their glove box. So I don't know if this is funny. I don't know if this is sad. I don't know if this is an alarm bell. Erica, it makes sense of the fact that our important documents are seemingly just all over the place.
Well, it begs the question, how common is this actually? And also, what are the reasons that documents would be
removed?
Exactly. And if they're removed on purpose versus if they were removed in the course of just moving in general. I mean, I think back to my divorce, and my ex and I still send things to each other. It's been almost a decade, because you find like pictures, you find whatever. So it's like, I'm wondering what the reasons for these documents showing up in places that they aren't supposed to be are, because I do think that intent is very important.
Yeah, I think it's just a political tool at this point. You know what I mean? I don't know why Trump took documents. I don't know why Biden. I don't know if they did or who did. But now it's just like nothing's going to happen to either of them, right? Because if something happens, if something happens to Trump, you have to have that same thing go to Biden.
But what if
and vice versa, if something goes to Biden, I don't think so. I think nothing's going to happen. I mean, we could talk about logs and all this other side stuff. It's about bottom line. Nothing's going to happen to either of them. That's just it.
Completely agree.
I want both of them investigated, and I know they are, and I want them to look at intent. I want to know if those documents were taken for nefarious reasons, whether it be Biden or whether it be Trump, because that intent is the difference between whether it's disorganization, which of course is an alarm bell.
Yeah.
But if the intent is nefarious and causes us national security issues, I want that person prosecuted.
How do you prove intent?
Yeah.
I feel like that's the
but
problem. We're wasting so many taxpayer dollars, and I agree with you, Sammy. But how do we couldn't even prove intent with January 6th.
We could. There's people in jail.
Yeah, I mean, the people that were actually doing it, but in terms of the people higher up, when I say go fight like hell, that could mean just like, you could say that to the Notre Dame football team, or you can't prove that means go fight. It could be a figure of speech.
The key word is higher up, right? You could find intent for people on January 6th because people are in jail, right? When you take it to the next level, I want to know what happened on Epstein's Island. We'll never know. I want to know who shot JFK. We're still not opening those. When people on higher levels, these things happen to, there are no repercussions. Time after time after time, nothing will happen, but we'll squawk about it for the next 2 weeks.
That's unfortunate, but there's truth there. Okay, so here's another thing that got a lot of people talking. Whether or not that there is a possibility that these documents were planted. So Representative Hank Johnson told Fox News that he's not ruling out the possibility of foul play, suggesting that there should be an investigation to rule out any possibility that the documents were planted. Now, he's not the only one. Joe Rogan shared the planted documents theory. Take a listen.
they're trying to get rid of him.
Yeah.
That's what my guess would be. They're trying to get rid of him. If all of a sudden his own aides are sending these, instead of like taking these classified documents which you have located and go, well, let's not do that again, and locking them up somewhere. His own aides
Self-reporting?
Dude.
Come on.
That
dude.
sounds sus.
It's like an episode of House of Cards.
Well, I mean,
Why are you laughing?
Because I just finished the Madoff documentary on Netflix, and it's just amazing how for certain people, people will look the other way. And also the idea of you don't want to stumble across something, and I don't care how close I am to an individual, that implicates them in some sort of a potential crime or wrongdoing, and then not at least this is called covering your own butt.
Right.
So it is their responsibility that if they find something that is considered classified outside of the scope of where it should be found, to turn it in. I don't think that it's a ploy to make sure that Biden can't run again. I just think that that's the nature of covering your own butt.
Yeah, well, I think it's two things. I think both can be true. When we start looking at could aides leak things or do things to try and get their president in trouble, I think that we saw that with President Trump. I think for sure things were leaking out of that White House to make him look bad.
We saw that with Nixon,
right,
too.
With Nixon as well. With Trump, it was like he's not paying attention to meetings. You know, this is he had this person in the office and they didn't have security clearance. All these things leaked out over the course of 4 years. Nothing happened. The idea that human beings would plant evidence or human beings would try and vote twice in a county, it never makes sense because the risk doesn't merit the reward you would get. Getting Biden out of office as an aide, okay, he's not there anymore, but getting caught doing that as an aide and possibly being court-martialed or whatever the heck would happen to you is way worse. It doesn't make any sense for somebody to do that.
Well, you would think that, right? But going back to the JFK explanation, again, I'm all into conspiracies. Those time logs were changed. Like when JFK arrived at this and where the bullet was found, those logs were deliberately changed by the people in charge. So when you're saying the government doesn't do nefarious things,
yes,
I have to totally disagree with you.
The government, yeah.
Who are we talking about?
I'm talking about an aide that would also remind him he has to speak at a middle school tomorrow.
No, I'm not talking about an aide. I'm talking about people high up that are like, we need to get this bozo out of office. Sorry. You know what I mean? He probably thought he was taking home his lunch.
Bozo.
And he was like, he doesn't know what he's doing. Let's be honest. He can't run again, okay? Let's put it out there, okay? Yeah.
There's a discussion to be had.
Yeah, there's a discussion to be had. Everyone's like, oh my God. Listen, let's be honest. He took home his lunch and they were classified documents.
It just feels ageist, Jeff.
Well, of course. Come at me. I don't know.
Everything is going to be
As a Democrat, I don't want him running either, so I'll give you that.
I mean, that's
As a U.S. citizen, he shouldn't.
Yeah.
That's it. It's not sides. He shouldn't. He doesn't know what's happening.
Did you have a correction for me, Jody?
No.
These are documents from the time he was vice president. Jody just wants to clarify.
Well, that's a big deal. But still, I mean, his vice presidential documents, I don't think would be as important as anything current right now. I don't.
He doesn't know the difference.
I think that's really what the most important thing is. What do these documents actually say?
Right.
Like, what are their documents
But they
of?
can't tell the public that. They can't tell us what they say.
Okay, but we need. Okay, all right. We're going to talk about this during the break. Coming up on DBL, a new monument honoring MLK is getting a lot of mixed reaction. Is the statue a fitting tribute, or did it miss the mark? And our interview with Sybil Shepherd and Steve Guttenberg, they're telling us all about their new Lifetime movie.
It's a new year, and DBL is all the talk.
Let's get it going.
We had a lot to talk about last year,
I'm flexing every day.
and we're not stopping in 2023.
I'll see you guys on the flip side.
He can just say anything he wants without any evidence whatsoever, and people go, "Oh, maybe." It's
Really, you know what's so bothersome about conspiracy theories is they allow people to get hooked on the fantasy of all of these things happening, and then they can apply it to anything. So if you see the president do something illegal, you go, well, look, they can doctor footage now. deep fakes. It's like sometimes just trust your eyes and your instincts about what really happened.
People, and then people are going, yeah, maybe his own people did do it. There's no evidence of that whatsoever. It's just a stupid conspiracy theory.
I always think about this with conspiracies because we watch we watch a lot of movies and we assume that human beings are capable of doing things, and we are not. Even with the Clinton Lewinsky scandal, pre-internet, pre-being able to, they still found that dress with the DNA on it.
People can't keep
They
secrets.
still found it.
Are you kidding me? If people had really major secrets, no one can keep a secret. The government can't keep a secret.
The government's full of people. And
the conspiracy theorists think that there's this massive cover-up and that everyone's able to keep a secret, and it's not ever the case.
How quickly does, like, even when a band breaks up, does, like, there's interviews and then the road manager's like, yeah, Al was a mess on tour. Everybody wants to spill.
Yeah.
There's no way that there's, like, 200 people, like, keeping this secret about 9/11.
Right.
Are you kidding me?
So dumb.
It's impossible.
It is impossible.
It's impossible. So I don't
know
even though
where
BJ,
I stand. I just want to know intent. I really do. I think we're comparing apples to oranges here. I'm not saying what Biden did is right. I'm not a fan of Biden's, but I do think that Trump's intent is much more nefarious and needs to be looked into. Welcome back. Yesterday was Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and check this out. Brittany Griner made a special appearance at the march in Phoenix. This is her first public appearance since her release from a Russian prison last month. Meantime, check out this new monument called The Embrace that was dedicated to Martin Luther King Jr. and his wife, Coretta Scott King, and made its big debut in Boston yesterday. So a lot of people have mocked it. Some are describing it as hideous or disrespectful to the couple. Some people even said it looks like a sexual act. Well, the $10 million bronze statue was inspired by this picture of Coretta hugging Dr. King after he won the Nobel Peace Prize. So DBL Nation, always want to hear from you. What do you think of this new statue? Is it a beautiful tribute, or do you think it missed the mark? Go to dblvote.com to weigh in. Erica, did it miss the mark?
I think the art is subjective, and it has a lot of people talking. And when you listen to or hear from the artist who said that there weren't a lot of pictures of Martin Luther King Jr. that emoted joy, unbridled joy, as this photo. We normally see him very stern-faced and very serious, and this particular thing stood out to him because of the joy and elation on his face. Now, he chose to just use the actual embrace, and for one, I think that it's a beautiful representation of something that we all need to be thinking about and paying tribute to.
Yeah, when I look at this, your first initial reaction is there's a monument, that really honors one of the most beautiful people that's ever walked on this planet, and that is a good thing. You cannot argue that. But what you can argue, Sam, is art. This is abstract art, and part of art, whether we are talking about a Monet, or we're talking about Beyonce's new album, or we're talking about this statue, you can have an opinion. And people having an opinion one way or the other, saying, I think this is beautiful, or I think this is hideous, they are allowed to have that opinion.
What do you think?
And it's not for me. It's not for me, but when I look at it, I focus on what I do like about it, and I really don't like the arms part, but I like their hands that are clasping, and you can see the wedding ring in there. And I was thinking to myself, I would have loved to see a statue with just their hands together. I think that's kind of cool. But I am a big fan of art. Went to the art museum by myself on Friday. I like art. But you are allowed to not like that.
Right.
That does not make you racist. That does not mean that you don't agree with Dr. King's teachings. That means that in a weird way, if you think about it, you have achieved what Dr. King wanted. You are allowed to have your own feelings, your own opinions about things, and without persecution. As a black person, you can just sit and observe art in an art museum or outside, and you will not be harassed by the local whatever. So in a weird way, I kind of like this because it
The more
shows,
you think about it, I feel like the more you're approving of it. Martin Luther King III, he responded to it. He said, I think that's a huge representation of bringing people together. I think the artist did a great job, and I'm satisfied. So his own bloodline is happy with it, apparently. But I do really want to quickly congratulate you guys all with how you handled the Martin Luther King episode yesterday, because we had so much feedback. I watched it from home with my daughter Sophie. It was so powerful. Here's some of the responses. I just had to write to let you know that I thoroughly enjoyed today's episode on Martin Luther King. I record DBL every day. Most of the time I enjoy it, but today it was above expectations. That's from Pat. And then also, great job on MLK Day presentation. What a great history lesson. Thank you, David. So, and then it looks like 56% of you believe it missed the mark. We'll be right back.
You've probably heard Stevie Wonder's wildly popular song, Happy Birthday. A viral tweet says Wonder's song was written to promote the movement to make MLK Day a federal holiday. Verify viewer Erica asked if this is true. So let's verify using these sources. Stevie Wonder was heavily involved in the movement to make Martin Luther King Jr. Day a national holiday.
Please join me urging the U.S. Senate and your senators in particular to vote yes on S-400, a bill to make Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday a national holiday.
Wonder gave that speech on August 27, 1983, during a rally for the 20th anniversary of the March on Washington. Following the speech, Wonder sang Happy Birthday, the fifth track on side 2 of his 1980 album, Hotter Than July.
And in truth, our hearts will sing, thanks to Martin Luther King, happy birthday.
The original vinyl sleeve for the album directly advocated for King's birthday to become a national holiday. And according to Motown Records, the record label which released the song, Happy Birthday became the signature song of the MLK Day campaign. So we can verify, yes, Stevie Wonder did write the song Happy Birthday to support making Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday a national holiday. With your Verify, I'm Ariante Till. Are you skeptical of headlines and what you see on social media? We are too. The Verify newsletter answers your questions, clarifies what's true and false, and even includes a daily fun fact. Go to verifythis.com/email to check it out.
Welcome back to DBL. You may remember a real-life headline of an aspiring romance novelist who was found guilty of murdering her husband. So back in 2018, the story went from headline to Lifetime. And we sat down with Sybil Shepherd and Steve Guttenberg to talk all about their leading roles in Lifetime's How to Murder Your Husband. Take a look.
Hey, everybody.
We're so happy to have you two. Now, Steve, you've already made an appearance on our show without you even realizing it. We bought a cameo for Tori. Let's just roll it. So this might trigger your memory.
T-Bone. Oh my gosh.
Tori, it's good to hear. You know, I do remember doing that, and that was so cool, and you're so sweet. And thanks for giving me such love. You're a doll.
Well, I love the chemistry that we share. Just kidding. You share as Nancy and Steve. You guys were strangers before the movie, and I wanted to know, Sybil, Steve, what were your first impressions of each other?
I fell in love instantly.
Yes, girl.
I with this man. Oh my God. And then I had to kill him.
Little murder between friends.
Oh man.
The first time we met was in the makeup room. I was nervous because I'm really a big fan of yours. When Sybil walks in, Sybil's a movie star.
Yeah.
So, you know, and she's tall and beautiful. And Sybil walked into the makeup area and, you know, said hi to me and sat down and started getting to her work. And Moonlighting, Glenn Gordon Caron.
Yep.
So I'm sitting there and I'm like, wow, I'm working with Sybil Shepherd. Sybil wants to be really great in every scene. She's asking, why do I do this? What's my motivation? Why would I create this? Why would I walk in? And those are great questions. And for another actor, it ups your game. So when you work with Sybil, you you got to up your game a little bit, which is great because I want to be really good.
It's an honor to ask two such accomplished actors. I've always wondered this question. Is there more pressure when you're playing a real person to be true to who they were and portray that on film?
I had to learn who that person was, and a lot of the ways I learn, actors learn differently, and I'll just speak for myself, that I take 50% of who I am by the gray wig that they handmade for my hair, and the way they did my makeup, and then learning about her, reading about her, seeing interviews of her, and then trying to forget her because I had to become her.
If it's a true to life character, I kind of think it's a little bit easier because I have something to work off of. So I look at the videos and I look at the voice and I watch as much as I can and read as much as I can about that person. And then, basically I think it's an imitation. A lot of the scenes are imagined in the writer's mind. You're trying to respect and honor that character, especially because Daniel Brophy, who I'm playing, was dead.
Right.
So I want to honor his memory and just do the best job I can as an actor. And, frankly, I want to work. I want to get another job after this.
I love it, yeah.
That's the best answer. We all know Nancy Brophy, but you two have taken a deep dive more than anybody else. So do either of you have empathy for Nancy Brophy after learning everything you have?
Our father was a violent alcoholic. Now, my father was a violent alcoholic, but my father was also a great man and a wonderful man. He taught me to play football in the front yard, which was a very useful skill. But then, like I did when I left Memphis at 18, and for the first interview for a film, and the guy said, can we get down on the floor and rehearse the love scenes? And I did not get down. Instead, I crossed my arms across my chest and said, I don't think so.
Yes.
I wanted to know if there are any scenes that actually scared you to shoot. Was there any moments you were fearful?
It was terrifying, actually, to shoot this man, but I couldn't act that way. My character had to not be terrified to shoot my wonderful husband, played by one of the most brilliant actors and sweetest guys I've ever known, and having to kill him. That was a tough one. I had to be the character now.
Steve, were you scared of Sybil?
Well, Sybil's, I mean, I'm not, I am frightened. I'm frightened of all women.
Good answer.
That's a smart man.
Sybil's a great actress. So the one scene where she's supposed to kill me, and I've told you this, that I looked in her eyes when she's talking to me before she kills me, and it scared the crap out of me. She was a murderer. Wow. And Sybil. I went, whoa, that's like too much.
Thank you both for taking the time. Sybil Shepherd, Steve Guttenberg, thank you to our viewers.
Wait, the chemistry between those.
I know.
And Steve, yeah.
Tori. How to marry your husband.
What a pleasure, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, y'all.
Ciao, Bella.
Ciao.
They kissed. How to Murder Your Husband, the Nancy Brophy story, is streaming now only on Lifetime. We'll be right back.
According to the latest data from the CDC, almost 20% of kids and teens ages 2 to 19 are obese. That's about 14.7 million children. We spoke with a doctor about these new guidelines and are getting you the facts. Our source is the American Academy of Pediatrics, or AAP, pediatrician Dr. Soren Johnson with Novant Health, Robin Hood Pediatrics, and the CDC. According to the CDC, 12% of kids 2 to 5 are clinically obese, and it only gets worse from there, with 20% of kids 6 to 11 suffering from obesity.
This is something that's kind of accumulated over years, and the percentages just keep moving up.
So let's take a look at those new guidelines. They recommend initial interventions requiring upwards of 26 hours over 3 to 12 months of intense in-person behavior and lifestyle treatment, which include coaching on nutrition, physical activity, and changes in behavior. AAP states this approach should be used for kids 6 and older, but it could be used for those as young as 2. After intensive therapy, the AAP states weight loss drugs should be considered for adolescents as young as 12 years old, and 13-year-olds with severe obesity should be evaluated for weight loss surgery.
They are trying to bring that to the forefront and say, look, we should be talking with our patients at a younger age and considering this. It used to be kind of 16 years old and up that we would consider that bariatric surgery as an option.
Dr. Johnson says medication and surgery would be used in extreme cases, and it's important for families to speak with their doctors to figure out what's best for their children. With your Verify Fact Check, I'm Megan Bragg.
Republican George Santos has taken his seat as a congressman representing Long Island. After he won his seat in November, news reports revealed he had embellished or outright fabricated much of his personal and professional history. Some Republican leaders have called for Santos to resign, but he's refused to do that. So what actions can be taken against him? Can a sitting member of Congress be removed from office? Let's verify. Our sources, the Constitution and the Congressional Research Service. Article 1, Section 5 of the Constitution says that a 2/3 majority vote in the House is needed to expel one of its members. The Constitution then requires a special election be held to replace them. So we can verify, yes, a sitting member of Congress can be removed from office. But House Republicans have not indicated they have any intention of expelling Santos. Only 20 members of Congress have ever been expelled, 18 for treason, mostly during the Civil War, and 2 for corruption. An expulsion by 2/3 vote is the only way to remove a sitting member unless they resign or die. The Constitution provides no mechanism for voters or anyone else to recall a member. And even being convicted of a crime and sent to prison can't by itself remove someone from office. They'd still need to be expelled in a vote. Speaker of the House Kevin McCarthy has said he doesn't want Santos to be on any important committees, but that he won't keep him off committees altogether. With your Verify, I'm Casey Decker.
Welcome back. Did you know just 6 minutes of intense exercise every day can boost your brain's lifespan? It's time for some joint and muscle support brought to you by Omega XL. A new study found that a short but intense bout of exercise can increase a special protein in the brain linked to brain formation, learning, and memory. So with this special protein in the brain increased, your brain is protected from age-related cognitive decline, which can delay the onset of neurological conditions like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's diseases. In the study, scientists found that brief but vigorous exercise is the best way to increase this protein compared to a lengthy session of light exercise. So if you're exercising, don't let it go to waste. Make sure you're exercising vigorously, getting your heart rate up for at least 6 minutes. Omega XL has improved the lives of millions of consumers, supported by 30 years of clinical research. Omega XL's powerful and proven benefits have transformed the lives of athletes, celebrities, and dedicated daily users. Call 800-813-6801 or visit omegaxl.com for more information.
That's great. Yeah, I do that, or I do. I like to chop wood and do stuff around the house. That's my
chop wood. Get out of here. Chop wood.
This is Daily Blast Live. We're talking about what you're talking about.
Get real.
No.